In the early hours of January 20th, 2008, Reno, Nevada was unusually quiet. Snow rested on sidewalks and rooftops, muting the normal sounds of the city. Porch lights cast a soft yellow glow over empty residential streets, and most people were asleep inside their homes, unaware that something deeply wrong was unfolding nearby. It felt like one of those winter nights where nothing unexpected happens, where routines carry on undisturbed, and safety feels assumed just a few miles from downtown Reno. In a quiet neighborhood close to the University of Nevada, a small house on McKay Drive stood dark and still, the kind of place where college students often stayed over after late nights. Especially during winter, inside that house, Brianna Michelle Dennison was asleep on a living room couch, wrapped in a blanket, resting peacefully after spending the evening with friends. Everything about the situation suggested she was safe. The door had been locked, the area was familiar, and Brianna knew the people she was staying with well. She had stayed there before, and there had never been any reason to feel uneasy. She had not gone out alone late at night. She had not taken risks, and she had not wandered into an unfamiliar place. She had simply chosen what felt like the safest option available. Brianna was 19 years old, a college student balancing school, friendships, and the everyday pressures of young adulthood. She was studying psychology at the University of Nevada, Reno, interested in understanding how people think and why they behave the way they do, especially during moments of struggle. Friends described her as thoughtful and kind, someone who listened carefully and made people feel heard. She was not loud or reckless, she did not seek attention, and she was known for being responsible and cautious. The kind of person who planned ahead and made practical decisions. That night was no different. Instead of driving home late in freezing temperatures, she stayed with friends, choosing comfort and safety over convenience. Earlier that evening, the house had been filled with conversation and laughter. Friends gathered to celebrate a birthday, nothing wild, nothing that stood out. As the night wound down, lights were turned off one by one, doors were checked and locked, and people went to their rooms to sleep. Brianna settled onto the couch in the living room, wrapped herself in a blanket, and closed her eyes. She expected to wake up in a few hours, grab her things, and head to class, continuing the routine she had already built for herself. There was nothing to suggest that this night would be any different from countless others. Nothing to hint that danger was approaching, but sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning, that sense of safety vanished. Investigators later believed a man approached the house while it was still dark. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged doors, no sounds that woke anyone inside. Whoever entered moved carefully and deliberately. Brianna was taken from the couch while she slept. She did not have time to react. She did not have time to call or text anyone. Her phone remained inside the house. Her shoes were still where she had left them. When the person responsible left the house, Brianna Dennison was gone. There was no visible mess, no sign of a struggle, no immediate indication that anything terrible had happened. Only the sudden absence of someone who should have been there, taken from a locked home on a quiet street during a night that was supposed to be safe. Morning arrived quietly on McKay Drive. Sunlight filtered through the windows, alarms went off in bedrooms, and the house slowly began to wake up. At first, nothing felt unusual. It was an ordinary winter morning, the kind where people move slowly and shake off sleep. Brianna was supposed to be there, asleep on the living room couch where she had spent the night. But when her friends came downstairs, the couch was empty, the blanket was still there. But Brianna was not at first. No one panicked. They tried to explain it away. Maybe she left early for class, maybe she stepped out for a moment, maybe she had gone somewhere nearby. As minutes passed, those explanations began to fall apart. Brianna's shoes were still by the door where she had left them. Her phone was inside the house, untouched and silent. She had not taken her purse, and nothing suggested she had planned to leave in January in Reno. No one leaves without shoes or a phone, especially not someone as careful as Brianna. Concern grew quickly. Calls and texts went unanswered. Friends searched the house, checked bathrooms and bedrooms, and stepped outside to look up and down the street. There was no sign of her, no footprints in the snow, no indication that she had gone anywhere on her late morning. Worry turned into fear. Brianna's family was contacted, and police were called to the house on McKay Drive. What began as a missing person report immediately felt different. This was not a case of someone running late or forgetting to check. Something was deeply wrong. Officers arrived and began searching the house carefully. Room by room, nothing appeared disturbed. Furniture was in place, doors and windows were intact. And there were no signs of a struggle. That absence of chaos stood out. It suggested that whatever had happened, it had happened quietly. Investigators focused on what Brianna had left behind. Her phone, her shoes, her personal belongings, all still inside the house. To experienced detectives, those details mattered. People do not disappear without essential items unless something has prevented them from taking them. The search expanded beyond the house. Officers canvassed the surrounding neighborhood, checking nearby streets, yards, and open areas. Friends retraced their steps from the night before, replaying conversations and movements, hoping something small had been missed. Hours turned into a full day, and still there were no answers. As word spread, concern rippled through the community. Flyers were printed, and Brianna's photo began appearing across Reno. Local news stations shared her story, and volunteers started coming forward to help search for Brianna's family. The waiting was unbearable. Every hour that passed without news made the situation feel heavier. Hope remained, but it was fragile. Hanging on to the possibility that she would be found alive by the end of that day, one thing was clear: Brianna Dennison had not simply wandered away. She had not chosen to disappear. Something had happened to her, and whatever it was, it had begun inside a house where she was supposed to be safe. As the search for Brianna Dennison continued, the sense of urgency grew with every passing hour. Law enforcement expanded efforts beyond the neighborhood. Officers, volunteers, and search teams spread out across Reno and into surrounding areas, checking open land, drainage areas, and remote roads, hoping for any sign of her. The community became involved quickly. Flyers with Brianna's photo were posted across campus, in stores, and along busy streets. Local news stations covered the disappearance continuously. Her face became familiar to people who had never met her. And with that familiarity came fear, because if this could happen to Brianna, it could happen to anyone. For 3 days, her family waited, holding on to hope while preparing for the worst. Then on January 23, 2008, that hope was shattered. Brianna Dennison's body was found in a remote area near Hidden Valley, southeast of Reno. The location was isolated, far from campus, and rarely visited. The discovery confirmed what investigators had feared from the beginning. Brianna had been killed. The news spread rapidly through Reno, sending shockwaves through the university and the wider community. Vigils were organized. Students gathered in silence, and people mourned someone many of them had never known personally. What disturbed people most was not only the violence of the crime, but where Brianna had been taken from. She had been asleep inside a locked house, in a quiet neighborhood. A place that should have been safe. With the case now officially a homicide, the focus shifted. The search was no longer for Brianna. It was for the person responsible. Detectives returned to the house on McKay Drive with renewed focus. They knew that even quiet crimes leave traces. Forensic teams carefully examined the living room where Brianna had been sleeping, documenting the couch, the floor, and nearby furniture under detailed inspection. Investigators noticed something faint but important: a shoe impression on a piece of furniture near the couch. It was subtle, easy to miss, but once seen, it was unmistakable. The tread pattern did not match Brianna's shoes, and it did not belong to anyone living in the house. The shoe impression was photographed, measured, and preserved. It became one of the first physical signs that someone else had been inside the home during the night. At the location where Brianna's body was found, forensic teams worked just as carefully. Biological evidence was collected, allowing investigators to develop a DNA profile of an unknown suspect. For the first time, the case had a clear direction. Then another report changed everything. A woman came forward describing an attack that had occurred days earlier. She had been taken by a stranger during the early morning hours, like Brianna, but unlike Brianna. She survived. DNA from that case matched the same unknown profile found in Brianna's, confirming investigators' fears. This was not a single isolated crime. A pattern was emerging. Reno changed almost overnight. Students walked together, porch lights stayed on, doors were checked repeatedly, police increased patrols near campus, and fear settled into everyday life. People were not just grieving, they were worried about what might happen next inside the investigation. Pressure intensified, detectives knew the person responsible had attacked before, and there was no guarantee he would not do it again. Every decision carried weight. Investigators reviewed older reports, early morning incidents, and suspicious activity near campus. They mapped locations, compared timelines, and relied heavily on the surviving victim's account, which described an attacker who was calm, controlled, and deliberate. Weeks passed with no arrest. Then in mid-February, the break finally came. The DNA profile was identified. It belonged to James Bila, a 27-year-old man living in Reno. He had no personal connection to Brianna, confirming that she had been chosen randomly. On February 14, 2008, detectives arrested James Bila without incident. It was a quiet arrest, but it marked the end of weeks of fear and uncertainty. Search warrants followed inside his residence. Officers found shoes that matched the tread pattern discovered at the McKay Drive house. Forensic testing confirmed that his DNA matched evidence from both Brianna's case and the earlier assault with James Bila in custody. The case moved into the courtroom. Prosecutors presented a clear and methodical timeline, walking the jury through the events of January 19th and early January 20th. Brianna staying with friends, falling asleep on the couch, and being taken while she slept. The physical evidence was central: the shoe impression, the DNA, and the testimony of the surviving victim all aligned, painting a clear picture of what had happened. The defense raised questions, but the evidence left little room for doubt. Friends and family testified, sharing who Brianna was beyond the headlines: a daughter, a friend, a student, someone who was careful, kind, and deeply loved. In 2009, the jury reached its verdict. James Bila was found guilty of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual assault. He was sentenced to death for Brianna's family. The verdict brought accountability, but not healing. Nothing could undo what had been taken from them for Reno. The case left a permanent mark. It changed how people viewed safety, reminding them that violence can occur even in familiar places. Even behind locked doors, Brianna Dennison's story continues to be remembered, not just for how her life ended, but for who she was, and for the reminder that a single night can change countless lives forever.